Imagine reaching the summit of everything you were taught to want: success, ambition, validation, only to find that the view leaves you numb. No fire, no drive, no clear reason to keep climbing. This is the collapse you didn't expect. After all, isn't spiritual awakening supposed to bring light, energy, clarity? Why then does it often arrive cloaked in silence, fatigue, and a haunting emptiness? Carl Jung would say it is because what is awakening within you is not the ego's next achievement, but the deeper self that lives beyond all performance. And to meet that self, everything false must first fall away. The loss of motivation is not a failure, it is a sacred unraveling, a quiet rebellion against everything you built from fear, from conditioning, from the persona you wore to survive. At first it feels like grief, like losing the engine that once pulled you forward. But what you are really losing is the illusion that your worth is tied to motion, effort, or visibility. You are not falling apart, you are falling inward. Jung warned that the first act of awakening is often the death of the ego, not in some dramatic explosion, but in the slow crumbling of everything that no longer resonates. The goals you chase no longer excite you, the roles you played feel hollow, the mask you wore becomes unbearable, and in that sacred disillusionment, you begin to glimpse the quiet truth. You cannot return to who you were, because that self was never the whole truth to begin with. So, if you are watching this and wondering why you feel disconnected, uninspired, lost in the middle of a life you once dreamed of, take heart. You are not broken. You are in between versions of yourself. The self that is being born has no interest in running for approval. It is learning to walk in its own rhythm. And what feels like nothing is not the end. It is the silence that comes before the song, a clearing of the noise, a holy pause. This is not the death of your purpose. It is the seedbed of a deeper one. Stay with it. You did not lose your path. You are finally stepping onto it. You did not lose your motivation. You lost the mask that required you to keep performing. What feels like numbness is not apathy. It is the echo of a false identity disintegrating. In the quiet aftermath of awakening, something inside you no longer wishes to keep climbing ladders that lean against walls you never truly wanted. This is the death of the persona, the collapse of the image you constructed to survive in a world that never really saw the fullness of who you are. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, a necessary adaptation to the social world, but one that, over time, begins to take over. It becomes not just what you show others, but what you begin to believe about yourself. The driven achiever, the perfect parent, the constant giver, the ambitious partner. These are not lies, but they are not the whole truth. They are fragments arranged to secure belonging and approval, and awakening, in its rawest form, tears through that architecture like wind through dry leaves. The roles crumble, the motivations disappear, not because you failed, but because the self underneath is tired of pretending. You may feel like saying, "I don't care anymore," but this is not carelessness. This is a sacred silence, a quiet refusal to keep feeding the machine of identity. It is the soul whispering, "Not this, not like this." What once lit a fire in your chest now feels like ash. What used to thrill you now feels like noise. You may look at your job, your relationships, your to-do list and feel a strange hollowness. Do not be afraid of it. It is not a sign of laziness or failure. It is a psychic disorientation, the necessary confusion that comes when the map you lived by turns to dust, and the compass begins to reset from within. The persona does not die gently. It resists. It's a bargain. It tries to lure you back with old habits, old desires, old guilt. but something deeper in you has awoken and cannot be silenced again. You have tasted a deeper truth, and now the artificial sweetness of performance no longer satisfies. You no longer seek motivation to fit in, to impress, to be chosen. You are starting to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This in-between place is sacred. It is empty not because nothing is there, but because everything that does not belong is leaving. Let it. Do not rush to fill the void. Let the silence speak. Let the exhaustion soften your grip. You are not broken. You are in the threshold between masks and essence, between noise and truth. And while the world may not understand this pause, your soul does. This is not depression. It is a deep realignment, an invitation to stop chasing and begin listening, not to the world outside, but to the quiet rhythm that has always been waiting inside you, the one that needs no performance, only presence. There comes a moment on the path of awakening when the very engine that once drove you forward comes to a halt. The ambitions, the urgency, the endless reaching suddenly dissolve into stillness, not by choice, but by necessity. Carl Jung called this deep shift in antiodromia, the turning into its opposite. It is the psyche's way of correcting what has become too extreme, too rigid, too one-sided. Where there was once fire, now there is fog. Where there was relentless motion, now there is the strange gravity of pause. This reversal feels like failure to the mind, still tethered to old definitions of success. But to the soul, it is holy. In an antidromia, the pendulum of your being swings back to center, not to punish, but to balance. What once felt purposeful now feels hollow. You are not lazy. You are not lost. You are in the cocoon. You are the caterpillar undone, unstructured, unformed. The old self liquefies, and all that is not essential begins to dissolve. In alchemical language, this is the stage of putrefaction, the necessary rot that makes space for something truer to rise. This void you are standing in is not empty. It is sacred. It is the silence before the new voice emerges. It is the dark womb of transformation, the pause between breaths. And yes, it is uncomfortable. Our culture worships hustle and speed. It praises those who keep going, even when the soul begs for rest. But in every mythic story there is the cave, the desert, the forest, the place where the hero disappears before she returns reborn. This is your hermit phase. Not as retreat, but as initiation. You are molting, shedding an old psychic skin. That strange numbness you feel is not failure. It is the soft anesthesia of a soul protecting itself while it rearranges your inner architecture. The thoughts may slow, the fire may dim, but do not mistake stillness for stagnation. Stillness is where clarity is born, where truth incubates, where the deeper self, long buried beneath performance and programming, begins to take shape. Let yourself rest here. Let the world keep spinning. You are no longer driven by what used to compel you, because you have outgrown the container that held your old identity. You are not meant to return to the person you were. You are meant to become the one who was hidden beneath all the striving. Jung knew that the psyche demands wholeness, and in order to become whole, we must allow parts of us to die, not in despair, but in reverence. You are not in a breakdown, you are in the in-between. The void is the passage. It does not offer answers, only space. And that space is not empty, it is sacred, waiting for you to stop resisting and start listening. You are being prepared, not punished. And on the other side of this stillness, something real will rise. Something that does not hustle to earn its worth, but radiates because it finally remembers who it is. When you awaken and begin shedding the old layers, a strange numbness begins to settle into the bones of your everyday life. Nothing feels meaningful anymore. The routines that once gave you structure now feel hollow. The ambitions that once pulled you forward no longer inspire you. And it is here, in this great silence of meaning, that the ego panics. Because it has lost its map. The ego, as Carl Jung taught, is not evil. It is necessary. It gives us identity, function, and form in the world. But it is not the totality of who we are. It is only a mask we wear to navigate life. And when that mask begins to slip, the ego no longer knows where to go. It loses the coordinates that once kept it aligned with society's expectations. The awards, the recognition, the validation that used to mean everything now feel like ash in the mouth. This is not apathy, this is a sacred dismantling. You are not directionless, you are being redirected. The old motivations came from a place of fragmentation, from the need to prove, to perform, to belong. But now your soul is calling you home, not to do more, not to fix or chase, but to become more whole. This is the essence of Jung's concept of individuation. It is the inward journey of uniting all the lost parts of yourself, the wounded child, the abandoned artist, the repressed anger, the silenced intuition. They all live within you, waiting to be reclaimed. The ego wants clarity, the soul seeks depth. The ego wants achievement, the soul desires authenticity. And when you stop feeding the ego with artificial purpose, what remains is the raw invitation to go within. It may feel like the world has lost color, like your spark has vanished. But this emptiness is not absent. It is a transition. The fire has not gone out. It has simply moved underground, where it begins to burn through what no longer aligns with your essence. You are being reoriented, not outward, but inward, not toward accomplishment, but toward alignment. What felt like motivation was often survival, a way to keep moving so you would not have to feel the void. But now the void has arrived, not to destroy you, but to become the womb of your rebirth. You are being emptied, not because there is nothing ahead, but because something entirely new must arise that has not yet been imagined by the mind. This is the quiet death of the ego's illusions and the first breath of the authentic self. The part of you that does not need to be useful to be worthy, that does not need to be productive to be powerful, that does not need a destination to be whole. You are not lost. You are being stripped of the false, so that the truth can finally find space to take root. In that space, you will not find the next goal. You will find yourself. And from that place, the path will begin to form again. Not as a race to the top, but as a return to your center. The moment you begin to resent the void, you unknowingly prolong your stay within it. The impulse to rush through this stillness, to return to the old rhythm of doing, striving, and fixing, is natural, but also misguided. For it is not through force that the spark returns. It is through surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means giving up, but the sacred kind, the surrender of illusion, the one that allows the deeper parts of you to finally rise to the surface and speak. Carl Jung warned us that what we resist not only persists, but grows stronger in the shadows. He said, "Enlightenment does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is where the real work begins. In the thick fog of purposelessness, your shadow begins to stir, not to sabotage your journey, but to invite you into wholeness. The depression, the restlessness, the numbness, they are not signs that you have failed. They are signals that something hidden is trying to emerge. The shadow is everything you have suppressed to survive. The parts of yourself you were taught to hide in order to be loved. Anger you were never allowed to express. Grief you were too busy to feel, desires you abandoned to be accepted. All of it lives in your unconscious, waiting not for judgment, but for integration. And now, in the quiet space where ego no longer distracts you with false purpose, the shadow arrives, not to punish, but to show you what still needs your attention. If you rush to fix yourself during this time, you bypass the gold hidden in the darkness. If you try to force motivation to return before doing this inner excavation, it will only return as a mask, a performance, a recycled version of the same false self. But if you stay present with what arises, even the uncomfortable emotions, you will begin to see the purpose of the pause. It is not a detour, it is work. Healing begins when you allow yourself to witness what you once rejected. You do not need to fight your lack of motivation. You need to see it. Sit with it. Listen to it. Ask it what it wants to show you. You may find it is not resistance, but wisdom. Not laziness, but protection. Not failure, but a sacred invitation to feel what has long been buried beneath years of pretending everything was fine. In this dark night of the soul, a strange thing begins to happen. As you stop fleeing from yourself and begin to reclaim what you once abandoned, a quiet strength returns. Not the loud motivation of the old ego, but a softer, wiser energy, one that is rooted in self-acknowledge, one that no longer depends on proving anything to anyone. And in that shift, something new begins to move beneath the surface. This is where transformation becomes possible, not because you forced yourself to be better, but because you allowed yourself to become whole. You are not here to chase meaning. You are here to remember that you are meaning itself. And only through the courage to face your shadow can you reclaim the power, the presence, and the passion that was never truly lost, only waiting to be welcomed home. The return of motivation after awakening does not crash in like a wave. It returns as a whisper, gentle, unexpectedly, almost imperceptible, but it carries something the ego never could: truth. Where once you moved from pressure, performance, and proving, now something else begins to stir. A quiet, inner resonance. It does not shout, it does not demand, it simply pulls. And you feel it, not in the mind, but in the chest. A soft flicker in the dark, a spark that knows its own rhythm. Carl Jung called this the symbolic life. A life not directed by outer expectations, but by inner meaning, where the smallest acts are no longer trivial, they become sacred gestures. You do not rush into action just to avoid discomfort. You act because something inside aligns with what is before you. The soul does not chase. It responds. It listens to a deeper current that runs beneath the surface of appearances. And slowly you begin to feel it again. Not the old drive, not the compulsion to succeed or be seen, but a new kind of energy, one that is rooted in coherence. This is how the self begins to lead, not with blinding light, but with subtle gravity. You may wake up one day and feel the desire to tend to your space, write a sentence, take a walk with no destination. These small impulses are not meaningless. They are the soul's language. The ego looks for grand missions. The soul speaks through presence, through what makes you feel alive, even if no one sees it, even if it leads nowhere but deeper into yourself. The spark you were waiting for is not a return to the old fire. It is the beginning of something new, a warmth that does not burn you out, a light that does not blind but gently guides. What you once called laziness now feels like discernment. What you once labeled as apathy now reveals itself as wisdom. You no longer need external intensity to feel your life matters. You begin to measure meaning by how deeply you are connected to what you are doing, not by how much it produces or proves. This is the silent turning point. You are no longer at war with your own energy. You stop looking outside yourself for purpose. You stop waiting for motivation to arrive in the form it used to take. And instead, you begin to feel something new. Peace. You trust that if you keep choosing truth in small ways, a greater path will emerge on its own. One that matches not your image, but your essence. The whisper is sacred. Listen closely. It may not look like the life you thought you wanted, but it will feel like the one you were always meant to live. The self does not demand applause. It asks only for your honesty. And in answering that call, quietly and consistently, you begin to build something not out of ambition, but out of alignment. Something sustainable, something alive, something real. She once believed that being alone signified a flaw, a failure, a silent sentence handed down by a world that worships togetherness over truth. In those earlier days, solitude echoed like a judgment. The absence of a partner felt like a reflection of inadequacy. Like many, she mistook aloneness for deficiency, as if her value depended on being chosen by another. But awakening does not arrive gently. It tears through illusions like lightning through a night sky. And one day she could no longer ignore the deeper reality. It is far lonelier to be unseen in a relationship than to stand in solitude with one's soul intact. That moment of reckoning changed everything. The woman who once compromised for closeness began to remember her own wholeness. Carl Jung spoke often of the soul's journey toward individuation, the sacred process of becoming undivided. She had known what it was to split herself in order to be loved, to shrink herself to keep peace, to wear masks that suffocated the truth of who she was. But no more. What others might call stubbornness is, in her, integrity. She has faced her shadows, and now she refuses to abandon herself again just to be accepted. She no longer looks for love to fill an emptiness. The void has become a sanctuary. She waits not for someone who completes her, but for one who can meet her in her fullness. The love she seeks does not demand performance, nor does it punish authenticity. It is liberating, it mirrors, it holds space without chains, and until that love arrives, she walks alone, with a quiet power that unsettles those who mistake her standards for arrogance. The path she follows is not without ache. There are nights when the silence presses hard against the heart, when the memory of old warmth flickers like a distant flame, but she no longer bargains with that ache. She listens to it. She lets it shape her into someone too self-aware to repeat old patterns. Her solitude is not a wound, it is a vow, a sacred promise that she will not give herself away for less than she deserves. Many still view her through outdated lenses, whispering that she is too much, too intense, too selective. But in truth, she is simply awake, and those who are still asleep mistake discernment for distance. She has chosen to live from the soul, not from scarcity, from self-respect, not from fear, and that makes her rare, that makes her powerful, that makes her free. Love, for her now, must be a meeting of equals, a joining of two sovereign spirits who do not seek refuge in one another, but who walk beside each other because they have made peace with their own inner landscapes. She no longer clings, she no longer chases, she simply radiates the energy of someone who has come home to herself. And in doing so, she no longer hopes to be found. She has become the one who knows where she is. You did not lose your motivation. You lost the mask that once called itself purpose. You are not broken. You are being emptied of what was never truly yours. What you feel now is not absence, but clearing. The sacred dismantling of the false, so that something real may rise in its place. Carl Jung taught that the journey toward wholeness is not a straight path of acquiring more, but a spiral descent into the depths of the self, where all that is inauthentic must be burned away. What feels like collapse is not the end. It is initiation. It is the soul's revolt against the life that no longer fits. The fire you once chased, the goals that used to ignite you, were often fueled by ego, by the hunger to be seen, to be worthy, to be loved, according to someone else's script. But the self, the deep, undivided truth of who you are, does not burn with frantic ambition. It glows with something quieter, something more enduring. The exhaustion you feel is not failure. It is the body and psyche finally refusing to perform. It is your spirit demanding authenticity. This is not a breakdown. It is a sacred transition, a rite of passage, where the persona dissolves and the true self begins to take shape. And in this space, the world may seem silent. You may feel invisible, even to yourself. But do not mistake this stillness for emptiness. It is a womb, a place of gestation where your original light is not being extinguished, but remembered. You are being called back to essence, not the version of you molded by survival or approval, but the one who existed before the world taught you to perform. You are not lost. You are being rerouted inward. The soul does not care for resumes or accolades. It longs for truth. It longs for alignment. And if everything around you feels stripped away, it is only because the path of awakening leaves no illusion untouched. You are clearing space for something more honest to take root. This kind of rebirth is not glamorous. It is quiet. It is raw. It often comes disguised as numbness, as a lack of interest in the things that once lit you up. But that does not mean your light is gone. It only means the flame is returning to its rightful source. The fuel must now come from within, not from the gaze of others, not from the need to achieve, but from the resonance of living in truth. So let this be your reminder. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not lazy or lost. You are in a sacred transition. The cocoon does not rush to become a butterfly. The seed does not apologize for breaking open in the dark. Trust the silence. Trust the pause. Trust that what looks like falling is actually the ground preparing to receive you more fully. You are not losing your life. You are reclaiming it. And when the new fire comes, it will not burn you out. It will burn through you with clarity, direction, and peace. That is not the end. That is the beginning. If something within this message stirred you, if even a single word mirrored your inner experience, I invite you to let your voice be heard in the comments. Have you encountered that soul whose presence feels like home, or are you still walking the sacred path back to yourself? Your story, however unfinished, may become the lantern in someone else's darkness, the very sign they didn't know they were searching for. And if someone close to you is silently struggling with the illusion that love must hurt, that self-abandonment is the price of connection, or that they are unworthy of peace, share this video with them. Help me reach the ones who need to remember. Real love does not demand that we shrink. True connection does not ask for sacrifice of the soul. And the most vital union we will ever form is the one with our own inner truth. Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here, in this space, we journey beneath the surface of things, exploring the hidden architecture of the psyche, the whispers of the unconscious, and how every relationship is but a mirror reflecting our personal evolution. If there's a theme, a question, or a wound you would like us to explore in future videos, leave it below. This space breathes because of you. Your voice is not only welcome here, it is essential. Thank you for showing up, not just to this video but to your inner work, to the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. And always remember this, when the right person appears, your soul will know, not through fear, but through peace. But until that moment, let your most intimate relationship be the one you cultivate within. That is the foundation, that is the home. And from that wholeness, all things real are born. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.